It all happened so fast. You're just there, and then I was facing the other way, and then I was rolling through the median, and then I woke up on the ground, and there was people all over the place. I mean, it's like pictures, almost.
It was just before 13:30 on August 5, 2017, when an Oregon Department of Forestry firefighter fell asleep behind the wheel of an agency water tender and was involved in a rollover accident.
911, call 911.
He was returning to his duty station from a local initial attack fire that had started early in the afternoon the day before. The driver received serious life-threatening injuries, and the agency vehicle was totaled. The district forester and area director requested an incident review team in order to document the facts of the incident, to better understand the events leading up to the rollover, discover contributing factors, and promote a learning culture with possible recommendations aimed at future incident prevention.
Each fire season is unique in its own way, but 2017 had at least one thing in common with fire seasons of recent past, and that's that we had a lot of exposure hours. We had firefighters and support staff actively engaged in fire suppression throughout the entire summer, and even on the shoulder seasons. And so with that, we automatically know we also increase our driver exposure. And I know it's not a novel concept, and it's sort of becoming cliche, but if you ask around in the agency or if you talk to people in the fire service, what is your biggest exposure? Probably the majority of the time you're going to hear driving. And that's because we place a heavy emphasis on it. In driver's training, in RT 130, we can almost always expect it to come up as a topic at a safety officer's morning briefing or a division supervisor's breakout. It's almost become a bit of a catchphrase, and with catchphrases, you have to be careful that they don't become a catch-all. And what I mean by that is each specific hazard associated with driving has been diluted to one driver exposure umbrella. When we start to discuss more in depth driver exposure, we start to look at the topics like the size of a vehicle, how it handles on and off the road, traffic congestion, driver experience. And while all of those deserve attention and discussion on their own, the intent here is to specifically bring up fatigue and to allow for an in-depth look at a specific incident so that at a local or district level, we can address fatigue and how it affects us directly.
I'd say our fire season was pretty average coming into this. We'd had a couple rounds of lightning, so we'd been busy, but not abnormally busy. It was kind of hit and miss. You know, we'd tried to give days off where possible, but some folks had worked through their days off. It was just an average busy time of year.
Yeah, in 2017, you know, the fire situation in the West, there was nothing available. You know, I remember walking in the office one day and being told, you know, if you have another fire, you're not getting anything. It's going to be you and whatever we can get you locally, and you're going to have to try to deal the best you can with it.
The Indian Lake Fire was one of the first major initial attack incidents on the Pendleton unit in 2017. It was reported on August 4th around 13:45, and within 30 minutes an interagency response was being mobilized. By 14:30, Air Attack reported the fire to be 50 to 75 acres and running. Shortly after 1900 that night, the fire was estimated at 100 acres in timber. Resources on scene now included multiple aircraft, several hand crew squads with more on order, and the Pendleton ODF tender had just arrived.
To try to keep people engaged and fresh, we knew that it was going to be a long shift. It wasn't one of those things where we were going to be able to call more people in that night, knowing that we weren't going to get outside resources and that we were going to have that IA responsibility the next day. We kept working that fire until we were relatively sure that that fire wasn't going to be backing down into a canyon where we didn't have any access, where it was going to present control problems. And at that point, it was decided that we had the opportunity to bed people down up on the fire that night. Maybe a little after 2 in the morning, we started gathering people back at staging to have them get some shut-eye and plan for another 6 o'clock briefing the next morning to re-engage the fire. And whatever resources we had coming in the next morning, as they filtered in, we'd filter people out.
I was initially planning on dumping my tank until I got demobbed, and then my mind went straight to, all right, time to go home. I'm tired, I'm done. I'm gonna go get some sleep. I didn't have a single thought cross my mind that was like, man, I'm too tired to drive home, or I shouldn't be driving right now, I'm way too tired. and I was wide awake all the way up the gravel road, which I believe is mostly because of how bumpy that road is. You know, you're bouncing around in the cab and you're not gonna fall asleep in that. But the second I hit the freeway, once I hit the freeway, I was asleep. There was no, like, lulling me to sleep. I wasn't nodding off. There was no transition where I was starting to get tired. I woke up down the road a little ways.
I was released from the incident probably 15 minutes at the most behind the tender. Didn't feel overly tired at that point. Was ready to get back home, get some rest, and have a clearer head to think through the plan for the coming days. A few miles down the road, I noticed that traffic was backed up. Came over a rise, noticed that there was a wreck in the eastbound lanes. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Past where the wreck was located, I looked back and noticed the federal access property plate and immediately recognized it as the tender at that point. I remember cursing very loud. It was immediate shock, a thought of, is he alive? And at that moment, I remember being very, I would say, scared. You never want to see your guy in that position. You don't want to see anybody in that position, but when it's your guy, it's something else, and you can't plan for it. You never want to see it, and it's tough.
Nearly all involved felt a sense of remorse that they didn't notice any signs that would have alarmed them to issues of fatigue. A few even attributed their own tiredness as potentially limiting their ability to recognize the fatigue in others.
I mean, it was an hour drive back home. It wasn't a long one, but knowing it was a long shift, I made it a point to face with each of those demobbing resources, kind of just do a quick glance status check, I guess is what I would call it. With the fact that we bedded down the night before, it wasn't one of those big glaring concerns in my mind that they might be overly tired, because it's rare to get sleep on those type of fires. And so it was just one of those quick, hey, you've been demobbed, hey, make it home type of deal, and you just kind of quick assess, and everybody seemed fine at that point.
Fighting fire is physically and mentally demanding, and working long hours is a regular part of the job. Understanding how fatigue affects your physical and mental state, recognizing its common indicators, and knowing how to mitigate its effects are all critical to keeping yourself and firefighters alongside you safe. Not getting enough sleep or rest is obviously the main cause of fatigue, but it's also important to identify the other conditions at work and in our personal lives that can lead to functioning in an unsafe, sleep-deprived state. The demands of certain types of work, such as firefighting and other emergency services, make it difficult to get adequate rest and expose those who work under these conditions to fatigue-related risks. In addition to working conditions, our personal circumstances play an important role in our ability to get enough rest. These include such things as stressful personal circumstances, such as financial or relationship difficulties, poor quality of sleep, like insomnia, sleep apnea, and other types of sleep disorders, poor diet, and long commutes to and from work. When working conditions and personal circumstances both align to keep you from getting adequate rest, the short and long-term effects of your physical and mental health can be profound. While being tired may not seem like a big deal, it makes a significant difference in your ability to function effectively and safely. Recent studies have found that, even in the short term, there is a 20 to 50% reduction in ability to recognize and size up risk, reaction times, concentration, hand and eye coordination, short-term memory, and the difficulty to make decisions increases. Additionally, a recent study conducted by the National Institute for Occupational Health and Safety found that those who were sleep-deprived, that is, less than 8 hours a day, had twice the rate of workplace injuries and accidents. All studies in fatigue find decreases in overall performance and increases in rates of error and accidents. One of the most dangerous activities to engage in while sleep-deprived and fatigued is driving. Drivers who nod off account for 100,000 vehicle crashes in the U.S. every year. In addition, 21% of all fatal car wrecks can be attributed to fatigued or drowsy drivers. A study conducted by AAA found that sleeping less than 7 hours increases the risk of being in a car crash exponentially. Missing just 1 or 2 hours of sleep a night doubles your chance of being in a car wreck. Put simply, driving while drowsy is at least as dangerous as driving while drunk. The CDC has found that being awake for 18 hours impairs your ability to drive the same as having a blood alcohol level of 0.05. Driving after being awake 24 hours is the same as driving while legally drunk, or having a blood alcohol of 0.08. The bottom line is, the research shows that you cannot miss sleep and still expect to be able to safely function behind the wheel. Even if you miss as little as 2 to 3 hours of sleep from the recommended 7, you quadruple your risk of being in a crash. Awareness that sleeping less than 7 hours in a 24-hour period is an important trigger point in gauging your exposure to the effects of fatigue on your mental and physical abilities. But there are many other contributing factors that cause fatigue. That's why it's important to be able to recognize the signs of fatigue and to take them seriously, especially when driving a vehicle. Difficulty keeping your eyes open and frequent blinking, blurred vision, excessive yawning, you feel the need to rub your eyes, head nodding or trouble keeping your head up, feeling restless, irritable, or impatient, drifting from lane to lane or onto the rumble strip, daydreaming, trouble focusing or zoning out, not being able to remember the last few miles you've driven, missing your exit or not registering road signs, not maintaining a consistent speed, slowing down or speeding up frequently. The only real way to address fatigue is by sleeping, but catching up on sleep isn't as simple as taking a quick nap. Research shows that if you're not getting enough sleep, then your body begins to develop a sleep debt. This debt will continue to grow as you add on more and more hours of missed sleep. The more hours of sleep you miss, the harder it becomes to think and function. Your body cannot overcome this. Thinking you can keep yourself awake by turning up the radio, rolling the window down, or turning on the air conditioner will not work for long. How can you avoid the risk of driving while fatigued? The following are some recommendations that can help keep you safe. Get a good night's sleep before you travel. Don't wait for your body to tell you that you're tired, and make sure that you're well rested before you go. Beginning your journey with a sleep deficit is a major safety issue. Don't travel for more than 8 to 10 hours in a single day. Take regular rest breaks every couple of hours or 100 miles to stretch and refresh. Share driving whenever possible, or request a driver when you're at risk. Avoid prescription medications that may make you sleepy. Avoid driving when you would normally be sleeping. Recognize the signs of fatigue. If you are experiencing any of them, pull over in a safe area and take a short 15 to 20 minute power nap. A good rule of thumb would be to not drive if you have been awake for 24 hours or more until getting some rest. No one is immune to the effects of driver fatigue, but some groups of people are at a higher risk than others. The desire to get home to a meal, shower, a real bed, and family is an incredibly strong pull, but it is vitally important that you accurately size up your condition and that of those around you. As wildland firefighters, we must begin to think about fatigue and driving the same way we might size up a snag or other hazard, to look at the risks involved in our own ability with an honest assessment. Remember the signs of fatigue and take steps to ensure you and your crew get home safely. Taking seriously the risks of driving while fatigued is a first step in creating safer work practices. The second is legitimizing the narrative of fatigue in the workplace. No one is immune to fatigue. Being able to talk about it without being embarrassed or worrying about how you'll be perceived is key to managing and mitigating the safety risks involved.
We probably all recognize that fatigue is a part of our business, the business that we're in. We're never going to be able to eliminate being fatigued on the fire line. I think the emphasis behind this video really, and what we're trying to do is share what we've learned with the hope that it would, lead to more mitigation and prevention of fatigue out there and fewer incidents as a result of that.
It really is the responsibility of all employees to watch out for themselves and each other and monitor fatigue. Far often it's too late when we actually realize and recognize within ourselves that fatigue has set in, or others recognize and bring it to our attention.
As a manager, you don't always know what's going on outside of work per se, that could be affecting their sleep, that could be affecting their focus on the job, and that's kind of your realm as a manager, to try to talk to people every day and try to gauge that and make sure that everybody's where they need to be to go fight a fire.
It's sometimes really hard for us to know when to say when and admit that within ourselves. that we are suffering from fatigue, whether it's on the job, off the job, or a combination of both.
Monitoring those people, that especially if you know that you're going to be going into an extra shift with the same group of guys, and even if you get rest, maybe they didn't get the best rest, maybe that's something that you need to pay attention to. And even a small office like ours, you know, have drivers ready to go in those situations, people that you can call up and get rides, and just make it more of a mandatory thing that they're going to get a ride. Because being firefighters, you know, we always have that tendency that, yeah, we can make it home. You know, I don't want to be that guy that says, I can't do this, you know. And I think that's something that sets firefighters apart, but it's something that can cause an issue at other times.
The biggest thing is, I'm not sure in our profession how great we are at admitting we need help, or even recognizing the signs that we might need help within ourselves. So I think that the ability to go to somebody else and say, hey, I don't know if it's safe for me to drive home, because it's not. It's not worth it to do what I did, frankly. Just trying to get home half an hour quicker. Half an hour is not worth the 6 months I spent laid up.
You know, when I started as a seasonal employee, it was pretty normal to work all night, drive home the next day kind of thing. I understand the long-range effects of my decisions better than I did when I was, you know, a young firefighter. And so trying to mitigate that now on the backside is, I understand why we would encourage folks to camp out more or to, you know, sleep before they drive home. And I see the benefit now.
I think the challenges are promoting a culture that empowers employees to feel comfortable to talk about experiences they've had in a trusting and learning atmosphere. That's when it's really cool to me, is when that young firefighter goes through this experience and they feel safe to talk to their supervisors, to talk to their peers, to talk to their coworkers and share those experiences so that we can all learn from them.
While it was a tough situation, it was initially dealt with well, and the employees in the district, the people that were involved with the incident, have done a great job, I think, in participating proactively in coming up with some solutions, coming up with some training, a lot of creative thinking on how to mitigate this type of incident from occurring again. And I'm real proud of their efforts. We can share with others to learn from our experiences. That's ultimately a very good outcome, I think, and that's where we're headed with this effort. And we're hopeful that other people find some real benefit in us doing it.
If my story can help anyone else, then it's almost unfair of me not to share that. It's selfish. If I had anything to take away from it, it's just pay attention to yourself more. I know I personally have a tendency to worry about everything else first, and I think it's important. Just like with hydrating, I guess, you know, you can sometimes get distracted. You're not drinking enough water. Well, it's the same kind of way with sleep. If you're not getting enough sleep, you should notice the signs and you should get more sleep.
In addition to this video, please visit the links included in the description below. There you will find additional supplemental materials that can aid in group discussion and activities regarding fatigue, as well as links to other resources and useful information related to fatigue.